Hi, this is a training video which is part of chessvideos.com. This is a guide to how to promote a pawn and win with king and pawn versus king. So the goal here is to, whenever you're trying to queen a pawn in the endgame, is to get your king, so in this case the white king, to one of the key squares in the position. The key squares are the squares which, if white can control, he'll be able to promote his pawn and then checkmate black. Now with any pawn, the key squares are the three squares, or I guess the six squares at the end of the board. So f7 and f8, e7 and e8, and d7 and d8. Now, as the case is, when the black king is in front of the pawn, generally we need to get our king to either the key square d7 in this case, or f7. And keep in mind, for any other pawn, for the c pawn, it would be these two pawns. So we want to get to this square or this square. So the key to do that is to utilize the opposition, which is the term given in chess when, I guess, this is direct opposition, when the two kings are facing off, and whoever moves is on move in a sense will have to yield ground to the other side. Now you want to have the opposition, and in this case it's white's move. And when we say having the opposition, it means that we have this position and it's our opponent to move. Now in this case it's white to move, but he can seize the opposition by playing e3, and now black has to yield ground. He's got to play something like king d7, and now we've gotten to f5, and now we're already starting to encroach on these two key squares we want. So he's playing king e7 with the idea that he needs to try to defend these two squares. If he played something like king f7, we could simply play here, and now we're threatening to get to this square. So we have an advantage already, and he's got to try to defend it again with this. And now we can seize the opposition, and he'll have to move his king. Now the nice thing about this is that because our king has gotten so far in front of the pawn, we can use pawn moves to regain the opposition. So we can move our pawn, and now he'll have seized the opposition, but fortunately we can move our pawn again. And now the black king, because of opposition, has to yield us one of these key squares. So if he goes to f8, we're going to come to d7, and if he goes to d8, we're going to come to f7. So let's say he goes to d8. We now seize f7, and now, as you can see, all three of the queening squares are defended by the king, so we're just going to run our pawn home and make a queen. Like this. Now, to show how black can defend against this, we need to remember that black is always trying to yield the opposition. For example, if this was the position and it was white to move, the position would be a draw. So let's have a look at that. Say we're playing, these are all correct moves for white. Now say he plays, instead of that, he plays this move. This is a critical mistake, because if white plays e4, he allows black to seize the opposition with king f7. All of a sudden, the white king can't really black can adequately defend these key squares. The idea is that if king e5, black plays king e7, and he's gotten the opposition. So white's king can't really make progress against the black king. So in order to do that, he has to, as we can see, that coming to e5 is fruitless, so he's got to try advancing his pawn. But now the idea is that black just keeps the, he has the threat, he's blocking the pawn, and so white can't really advance anymore. If he tries something like this, we can just come straight back, with the idea that white still won't be able to get the opposition, because now he can no longer get his king in front of the pawn. For example, if he comes here, what we have is here, and black has the opposition, so the king can't advance to the key squares. He can try to maneuver around to get to f7 maybe, but we can just occupy, threatening. So he comes here, and now the situation is the same. And if he tries to advance the pawn, we can block the square, and now his only option is he has to lose the pawn, or if he tries to keep defending the pawn, we have stalemate. So this is a draw. This is the key idea with black, is that you want to force a stalemate or force white to give up the pawn. So as we can see in these kinds of pawn endings, both sides are striving for the opposition, in which one side will have to yield the advantage. So the key with white is to force black to give ground, and then to advance your king with the idea of getting to one of these key squares. So king e7, and now don't fall into the mistake of playing e4. You got to play king e5 to keep that opposition. If black backs up, now you can advance, and now because your king is two squares or more in front of your pawn, you'll have time to make pawn moves to regain the opposition. So if he goes here, you can just play a pawn move, and then you play it again, and you've regained the opposition. So that's the key. Those are the keys to, I guess, queening a pawn, to winning with king and pawn versus king. For more instructional videos, feel free to stop by chessvideos.com.